It's amazing to think that Albanese, who of course was elected, we should note, on the lowest primary vote ever, and it was hardly a thumping majority, he got a majority of 2 seats. But if he were to lose government, it would be the first time since that has happened since the 1930s that a first-term government would be turfed. It's got to be pretty bad to go out like that.
It is pretty bad. Few quick points. The first is I actually think there's a sense in which Morrison was a one-term government. I know he was already Prime Minister in 2019 because he'd been thrown in by the party to get rid of Turnbull, who was a disaster. But he only won one election. He only served one term, one elected term, and then he was thrown out. So I think that 1931 figure can be misleading a bit. The electorate can change its mind the way it's changing its mind. 3 quick points. The first is Albanese is dead in the water. Either he loses the election and there's a majority for the coalition, or he ends up with a minority government, and having led them to that much disaster, in about 12 months, 6 months to 12 months, he will be quietly pushed aside by the Labor Party and someone else will take his place. So he's dead. I'm really pleased the polls are saying this because I've been saying it for some time. I'm glad they've caught up. Look, I know it's tired. I know we say it all the time that oppositions don't win elections, governments lose them. But your point about how bad it's looking is that point. And the issue when you look at the total government, the total opposition, is weakness. Albanese looks very weak. Dutton is looking very strong. And if all he needs to do is either he could get to 76 on his own in the course of the campaign, or persuade 3 independents, 3 crossbenchers anyway, to join him. So I think Dutton's looking very strong. And to lock it in, all he needs to do is to pick the sort of culture war, the sort of culture issue, which everyone will agree with. And look, if he picked don't let men pay in playing yes, plastic straws, or don't let men play in women's sport. That's a 90-10 issue. 90% of the population agree with that. We know that the woke Labor Party can't ever do that.
But the Teals don't necessarily agree with things like that, and that's the issue, Kel, isn't it? Because he's going to have to appeal to them and look to the crossbench.
He's going to get 76 in his own.
It would depend.
Think he's going to be able to form a majority government?
I think that is an extremely difficult proposition because he needs 21 seats to do it. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult. And if it was, as this poll is saying, 3 that he needs, you could say Katter, potentially Rebecca Sharkey. So he doesn't necessarily have to go into, selling himself out to the Teals. But what is interesting, and you mentioned the Teals, Lucy, is that YouGov poll, which went down to the seat-by-seat data, found that although there were quite a few seats that Labor would lose to the coalition and Labor would potentially win a couple back from the Greens, none of the Teal seats would go back to the Liberal Party, which I think indicates where the Liberal Party now needs to be, which is not in those inner city wealthy seats that used to be their heartland. It's the outer suburbs, which that poll also found, the outer suburbs of Melbourne and Sydney, was where they had found the biggest swing towards the Liberal Party.
And that is where they're suggesting that this election will be resolved. The results will come from these outer city suburbs that are really feeling the pinch of the cost of living crisis. From my perspective, I hate giving weight to the polls, all right? And we look back historically, particularly when we look at the US and what's occurred there, how many times they've said Hillary Clinton was going to win in a landslide, right? It was neck and neck between Kamala and Donald Trump. And we've seen that you can't give too much credence to them. If the election was to go ahead based on these figures, we know that Dutton's going to win. But I don't know, given that so many people feel a bit about him at the moment, that he has been on the nose over a few issues and that particularly with female voters doesn't tend to poll very well. I don't know, Kel, that I feel that confidently that it's going to be a landslide for him. People are generally feeling very kind of disenchanted by the state of not just the Labor Party, but the two-party preferred system. From my perspective, I questioned Peter Dutton and whether or not he would have a position on this issue of biological males competing in women's sport. It took him weeks to finally come around and say, when he sat down with Peter Credlin, that yes, I disagree that that this should be occurring and this is a debate that we're going to have. But what is his policy going to be on this particular issue? That's what I want to know. So there are a couple of question marks for me over the coalition and whether or not they will in fact win this in a landslide.
Well, Joe, you have the Prime Minister's shell-like. How worried is he really about this stuff? Because he's been saying privately, or at least he was saying privately, that he thinks he can win government with more seats. Is that just bravado, or is he worried about this?
Terrifyingly, no, it's not just bravado. I think he actually
He
thinks
means it.
Yeah, no, look, again, I've always said Anthony Albanese's confidence is his greatest strength and greatest weakness. Certainly, the last I heard, the internal polling was much more positive for Labor than the public polls, the published polls. And they, of course, use a different methodology. They use tracking polls where they will go at the same time. So they can actually see with sort of granular detail, how people are moving in the seats. Now, I don't know what the latest is at all, but I think there's a few things here that not all of this polling will be able to take into account. One is, I agree with Lucy, that this is going to be a pox on both your houses. There is not a huge amount of support for Peter Dutton, even though Albo is obviously, people are frustrated with him, and that is going to happen in an economic crisis. So the other thing is that the Labor's record low primary vote is actually only a point or two below where it was when Albo got elected. And that's the other thing. Labor did not get in with a landslide. The normal pattern of changing government in Australia is you win with a landslide and then you lose about half those,
It was only
half that majority.
77 seats.
That's right, that's right. And then he won the Aston by-election, and because there was an unprecedented, literally once in a century swing to the government in a by-election of 10%, I mean, usually it's a 5% swing against, that made people sort of feel like Albo had won a landslide. And his popularity was huge in the first 6 months to a year. But
they
the
also
seats
hated Scott
But the seats were never there. That's
Scott
right.
Morrison was on the nose
so this
big
was people voting against Scott Morrison. So the coalition lost 2022 really, really, really badly. But Labor didn't win it particularly well. So it could be another sort of scrappy election where it gets through. Again, they're going to be doing stuff on a seat-by-seat basis. There will be an interest rate cut on Tuesday, inshallah, and that will make people start to think that things are going to get better, and that is concrete proof of that. There is the economy stuff is going to be the be-all and end-all of this.
Well, it's the only thing.
It is
the only
We hear about, and we love to dine out on the culture war stuff over there. The number one reason why Trump got elected wasn't because he was picking fights about, female-only toilets.
It was Bidenomics.
It was Bidenomics and the fact that people were tens of thousands of dollars a year worse
The
off
most successful
than they
campaign
were.
ad that he ran, by the way, that stuff about
cost of
women's bathrooms.
Yeah, that's right. And it's great red meat for the base, and it's great, like people Conservatives in Australia will be telling Peter Dutton, you've got to go harder, you've got to go harder, you've got to go harder. The focus groups that I've heard about, not from Labor, but from some of the pollsters mentioned here, actually show that even Liberal voters do not want to import Trump-style politics to Australia.